So welcome to a video on deflation. We'll look at the definition, the causes, the consequences and some examples. To start with, it could be defined as a negative inflation rate. It's when the value of money increases. It's a sustained fall in the average price level. And there are two causes, basically. You can either have a bad deflation or a good deflation. A bad deflation is when you have a sudden fall in aggregate demand, and this can kick off a whole period of deflation. So it could be caused by a negative demand side shock, either from within the economy or from elsewhere, endogenous or exogenous. And this shifts the aggregate demand line to the left. And as you can see, this is harmful because not only does the price level fall, and so you could end up with a deflationary spiral as a consequence, but also you have a fall in real output. And generally, deflation generally results in lower economic growth. It can result in a prolonged recession or certainly prolonged stagnation in the macroeconomy. So here, a cause of this could be an asset price bubble that then bursts, leading to a negative net wealth effect, and therefore a sudden reduction in aggregate demand. Or it could also be caused by a fall in consumer confidence. Anyhow, we'll look at the further problems that occur shortly. However, a good deflation could be caused by a rightward shift in the short-run aggregate supply curve. And this is good because although the price level falls and you're experiencing deflation, it has a good cause, which is an increase in productivity. If you have an increase in output per person, it would shift short-run aggregate supply to the right, or you could draw a long-run aggregate supply shifting to the right also to indicate a similar thing. This could be a result of new technology and also lower costs. It could have a beneficial effect of increasing your exports, and this occurred in Japan when they had a whole long period of deflation, which we'll come to. So you could have exports which will become more price competitive depending on whether your main export markets are experiencing deflation as well. So this is a good thing, and of course this is the opposite to one of the main problems with a higher inflation rate in your country. Right, let's look at the problems. So first of all, we're likely to experience a fall in consumption. People will obviously delay purchase, especially big ticket items, especially luxury goods, because they're going to be falling in price. If you wait a year, 2 years, they're going to be cheaper. So in effect, your real income will be increasing. So people will delay purchases, so that leads to a fall in consumption, and it's likely to lead to a reduction in the rate of economic growth. Secondly, it's likely to increase the real value of debt. So the opposite of inflation, if you look at the consequences of inflation, this is in a sense the opposite, with a capture too, which we'll come to. But it'll increase the real value of debt. There'll be an increase in the value of money, and therefore debt, the value of debt will increase in real terms. And therefore, same with servicing that debt or debt repayments. So if you're paying for debt servicing and debt repayments, they in real terms will increase in value. So there'll be a bigger percentage of disposable income from individuals on debt repayments. And therefore, this will tend to cause lower economic growth or stagnation as well. Thirdly, real interest rates are likely to increase because interest rates can't easily be negative. Theoretically, yes, there can be negative interest rates, but in practice, 0% is the lowest rate for interest. But if you have deflation, say of 4%, then the real interest rate is going to be plus 4%, a higher real interest rate. So the more the deflation, the higher the real interest rate, and therefore this is good for savers because they'll make a better return. So it will encourage saving and of course discourage borrowing, because borrowing will become more costly. If you're encouraging saving and discouraging borrowing from individuals, you're going to end up with less consumption and more saving, and therefore a drag on economic growth, as indicated here, of course. So that's the third problem. The fourth problem is you could end up with real wage unemployment, with classical unemployment. Because wages tend to be sticky downwards, people don't want to receive a lower wage, a lower number, a lower nominal wage, because psychologically that's difficult, absolutely related to loss aversion, but we won't go there at the moment. So sticky wages, workers resist nominal wage cuts. That's a cut in their actual money wages, and therefore real wages will actually increase, and therefore this could lead to real wage unemployment, which of course exacerbates your stagnation. Okay, so that's the fourth problem. I think probably one of the big problems with deflation is you can end up with a deflationary spiral. So lower prices, as we've explained already, could lead to falling aggregate demand. Lower wages would lead to a fall in aggregate demand. And also this will then lead to further price falls, wage falls, and a fall in aggregate demand in the future. So you go round and round. And of course, the fall in aggregate demand will be coupled with lower consumer and business confidence as the economy is in stagnant growth. So it's this deflationary spiral that many governments, policymakers and central bankers are concerned about. And therefore, they really make an effort to avoid a deflationary situation. Well, examples of deflation have been, two huge examples, will be Japan's lost decade. Now this occurred in '91. Put simply, as a result of an asset price bubble, assets fell, financial assets fell, and property assets, physical assets fell quickly in Japan in '91. This caused a huge negative demand side shock, an endogenous negative demand side shock. This then resulted in less consumption and a stagnant decade. Only because of the deflationary spiral, this went on and on. Because not only was there a lost decade of the 90s, arguably it was a lost decade of a similar phenomenon continuing in the 2000s and indeed in the 2010s. So in a sense, there was far more than a lost decade. There was probably a lost 30 years in Japan as a consequence of a deflation. Not great. Similarly, in the United Kingdom in the interwar period, there was a deflationary situation and phenomenon and low growth and a very high unemployment, over 1 million people unemployed throughout the interwar period. And this went on, the deflationary situation went on from 1920 to 1936. Interest rates were relatively high, and therefore that constrained demand. But also Britain, in 1925, Winston Churchill was Chancellor and accepted the advice of officials, although he privately says he didn't really agree with it, and we rejoined the gold standard. So the pound was, a pound appreciated and was worth a particular level of, a particular amount of gold. This meant that the pound was too high, and that constrained demand and led to prices falling as imports fell, for example. So this again caused a deflationary spiral. So anything good about deflation? Well, it is good if you're a net saver. If you're a net saver and you're living from your savings, then you're going to be better off. And it could lead to a rise in exports. But generally, because of the deflationary spiral, it's a dangerous situation and well worth avoiding. So thank you for watching.